Hey guys, I think I'm live. It says live video is starting, but hopefully that means I actually am live. There we go. Okay. Whew. Okay, I'm getting some weird stuff coming up that I haven't seen before, so I'm just gonna make sure like I actually know what's going on. All right, sorry about that. This is like a completely different interface than I have ever seen before for live video because they have totally changed everything, and it's been a while since I've done this. But anyway, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Juckstock. Stephanie and I run this group together. We are co-admins of this group. And I wanted to just take a few minutes today to talk to you about what my personal philosophy is of a healthy diet, and actually not just my philosophy, but the philosophy of lots of people all over the world. So just wanted to share that with you. And as you're hopping on, just like let me know, say hi so that I can see you're there. And also let me know, I want to say let me know if you can hear me, but I guess if you can't hear me, you can't hear me. But you'll probably comment and let me know if you can't hear me. So let's get into it. All right, so I have done so many experiments slash research into different kinds of diets over the years. I'm just, I guess, kind of like obsessive over health stuff and figuring out like the right way to do things. And you can probably hear my baby in the background. She's kind of making noises over there. But what makes this topic kind of confusing is that there are so many different experts out there. I say experts in quotes, with so many different opinions, and like a lot of these opinions are based in fact and scientific research, which, side note, this is why it's hard to do science, because different people can do good science and come to different conclusions. And I'm really sorry if my baby is like being super distracting. I think she just thinks it's really fun that mommy is talking right now. So anyway, so there are lots of experts with lots of different opinions, and I have tried like basically everything from, I grew up in a pretty healthy home. We ate fairly healthy, but then like when my husband and I were first married, we were trying to save money, and we ended up doing more of like standard American diet, which if you don't know what that is, we can kind of get into that later. And then I've done like vegetarian, I've done, what else? Paleo, autoimmune, paleo protocol. I mean, just kind of like the whole gamut. And it's so like, I really feel that diet is important and perhaps one of the most foundational parts of health. You've probably heard the expression that your health starts in the gut. And a lot of that has to do with the foods that you're feeding your body. Our bodies are created with this amazing capability for self-healing, but if we're not providing them with the building blocks that they need to heal themselves, then those capabilities are going to be pretty greatly diminished. So I see that there are a couple people on right now. I can't see like who you are. I just see that there are a couple of people watching. So like if you just say hi so that I know you're there, I'd love to know like who's watching and get a little bit of interaction going on here. So I've got a bunch of notes here, and okay, so I've tried a bunch of different things. It's hard to know like what is the best or right diet. I've eaten gluten-free because I knew that I got stomach aches and general digestive discomfort if I ate too much wheat. And there are health experts, again, can I say experts in quotes, who claim that all gluten is bad for everyone. And I don't really agree with that, and I'll get into that in a few minutes, exactly what I think about gluten. But it certainly does seem that it often does come with some detrimental effects, right? Like there are a lot of people who do better when they get gluten out of their diet. But then, okay, I'm a Christian, right? So then I would go back to the fact that like Jesus calls himself the bread of life. And surely, like if Jesus calls himself this, bread can't be all bad, right? Like why would he call himself something that is, I can't think of the word that I want, but like it's definitely a bad thing. Like why would he do that? That doesn't make any sense. And surely something that has provided the backbone of so many diets throughout the centuries couldn't be inherently bad. At least kind of go with me on my logic here. Excuse me. There are also aspects of like the paleo diet that made sense to me as I read a lot of the research behind like the harmful effects that different foods that are eliminated from paleo, the negative effects those can have on your digestive system. I've read a lot of that research, and I've done the Whole30 a couple of times, which is essentially paleo, kind of like a slightly more restrictive paleo. And I've also done the full, like I mentioned, the full autoimmune paleo protocol when I found out that my body was making thyroid antibodies. But again, going back to my Christian philosophy, my Christian beliefs, I, as a creationist, I completely reject the premise of the paleo diet that like this is how humans were eating, like the first humans hundreds of thousands of years ago. Like, I just don't believe that is true. So I kind of had some, again, I guess some like spiritual issues with the paleo diet. I don't know. Is it weird to bring your spirituality into your diet? I don't really think it's weird, but maybe it sounds a little weird. And then, like, kind of going the other direction, like vegetarianism was appealing to me because it was more cost effective not to buy animal products, and I knew that humans were created as vegetarians. Like in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve didn't eat, at least they didn't eat meat. I don't know about dairy products, but they were vegetarian at the very least. So why, after the flood, did God tell Noah and his family they could eat meat? Like, why did we start eating meat, and is that something our body actually needs? And then, like, I found that I was never really fully satisfied without animal products. So these are kind of like all the thoughts that have gone into my thought processes of trying to land on kind of a dietary theory, if you will, that made sense for me and was something that I felt like we could adopt going forward as our everyday methodology, how we eat. I don't know. I probably get way too analytical about this stuff, but this is just kind of how my brain works. Okay, so I felt like something was really missing, and I hadn't really landed on something that made a whole lot of sense to me. So my mom, who is a certified naturopath, had told me a few times, you need to look into the Weston A. Price Foundation. And if you have heard of Weston A. Price, just drop me a comment with Price or Weston, just to let me know like that you are familiar with his research and principles and everything. But she told me I should look into this. And so I did a little, and I was like, I don't know, I didn't really get it. Like, it seemed sort of esoteric, and I couldn't really like grasp what I was supposed to do if I was following, you know, his teachings. But then yeah, you probably heard that. So then I came back to a couple more times. You are so noisy, so noisy. And as I dug into it a little more deeply, it started to make more sense to me. Hang on, I'm going to go get her so that she's a little less distracting. Just got to clean you up. Yogurt all over. Yeah. I'm going to try to get down. You're messy, 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 messy. All right, let's get your face. Get your face. Oh, all right, here we go. Here's baby. Speaking of food philosophies, she was just having her lunch, so she's kind of messy. Let's get all the yogurt off your face. All right, so anyway, so we were talking about Weston A. Price, and so what was confusing to me about it was that his principles aren't really a diet per se. They're more like a general philosophy of eating that can be applied to a range of food choices and what works for you personally. So like if your genetic makeup is different from mine, there may be foods that work better for you or don't work as well for you in comparison to what works for me. So although I'm not perfect about implementing this kind of framework for healthy eating, this is the set of dietary principles that I strive to implement in my own home, that my husband and I have decided kind of makes the most sense for us, for our health and our children's health. So Weston A. Price, just to give you like a little bit of background, he was an American dentist in the 1930s who noticed that he was starting to see a lot of increased dental issues in his patients, especially in children. And he started to suspect that there were nutritional deficiencies at the root of these dental issues. And this is actually why Weston A. Price is so interesting to me, because I've had a lot of dental issues. So this is a very interesting philosophy to dig into. So he and his wife went all over the world and researched the traditional diets of people groups all over, and they noticed some interesting similarities. Hang on a second. Can you guys play quietly while I'm doing this video, please?
So can I have more candy?
No. Here's what I mean about not being perfect about this whole thing. We've got Christmas candy that the kids are eating. I'll be glad when it's gone. Anyway, so they noticed some interesting similarities among the different people groups that they studied. First of all, they noticed that the people who followed their culture's traditional diets tended to be healthier and have basically no dental issues. But when they switched to more modern convenience foods, like more heavily processed foods, the health of these people quickly declined. He was actually able to make side-by-side comparisons within these people groups. Guys, those Legos are very noisy.
Jaden got into them.
Okay, well, you need to move them where she can't get them, right?
Putting them back in the box.
This is why I don't do live videos a whole lot anymore, because I got kids. Okay, so he made side-by-side comparisons. So he had people in these traditional cultures who were eating the traditional diets that their peoples had always eaten. And then he had people within those cultures who had started to eat more of the convenience foods. And he was able to compare them and notice that the people who were eating the more traditional foods were like, I can't remember. I keep forgetting the words I want. I think it goes with being a mom. Excuse me. Josie. We're not good. What is going on, Johnny? Well, don't mess with what she's making, Johnny. Guys, I want you guys to go outside and play until I'm done, okay? Go outside, please. We might get through this without more distractions. We'll see. Okay, so he saw drastic effects, basically, differences between these different groups of people who were eating their traditional diets versus eating more modern diets, and they were very noticeable differences within even the first generation of people who shifted away from their traditional diets. So then he took all of these different cultures that he studied, and he came up with a list of principles that were consistent among all of the people groups that he studied. And from those, he kind of created a framework, sort of principles of a healthy diet. And there's a Weston A. Price Foundation that has continued his work. He is no longer living. That's probably obvious. But they have continued his research and expanded his principles a bit. So I'm going to just go into what those principles are, and this is essentially what we try to implement in our house for the template, essentially, for a healthy diet. So the first one is no refined or denatured foods. So this isn't really like no processed foods, because you're going to process foods in your own home. Like if you make yogurt, that is processing a food. But refining is like that process of stripping away essential nutrients and minerals. So we're not going to be refining foods in that way. And And honestly, this is one that I find very challenging. Like, sugar is in everything, right? Like my kids eating their Christmas candy, keeping me humble here. And like in our busy lives, right? Quick and easy food on the go can be super tempting. Like, I will sometimes stop at Chick-fil-A. I will admit that. But I am constantly working to improve on this one because I know it is so much better for our bodies when we are giving them that healthier fuel of like whole foods processed in ways that are helpful to the body instead of harmful to the body. And it does require some forethought and planning to make sure that you always have those healthy choices on hand. So that at its core, this principle means no refined sugars or high fructose corn syrup, no white flour, drinking raw milk instead of pasteurizing it or reducing the fat. So you want like whole fat dairy products, no refined vegetable oils. Vegetable oils are really nasty, or artificial additives. So then the second principle, after no refined or denatured foods, the second one is to include animal foods. And so this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Like, I wanted to be a vegetarian because it was, more cost effective, and like it kind of made sense to me in the sense of that's how God created man, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Like, they were vegetarians until the flood, right? And the Weston A price principles can work within a vegetarian diet, providing you're taking measures to supplement with any missing nutrients that you would get from animal products. But interestingly, Dr. Price found that none of these cultures he studied were completely vegan. Like, they all had some sort of animal products that they included in their diets. So just like some thoughts on this, I'm going to get a little bit philosophical here again, but my husband has done a lot of research into like Genesis and like the science there, and there is a professor, doctor of biology, I think, Dr. John C. Stanford, who wrote this book called Genetic Entropy. And actually, I think it's like a doctoral thesis, actually, so it can be a little bit hard to read in places. But basically, he's talking about this massive decline of the human genome and how there was a significant bottleneck after the flood because it was reduced to just Noah and his sons' families, right? So that significantly reduced the amount of variety within the human genome and passed on these genetic defects, if you will. So kind of our theory here, kind of what we've come up with, is that probably there were a couple of things going on here. Probably like there was maybe a change in plants and how easy it was for, or how many nutrients they offered the human body. Hang on, we got something going on here. I think most of being a mom is breaking up fights. Anybody else feel that way? Do you see yourself? Who's that? Is that Jaden? Okay, so plant composition likely changed after the flood so that plants no longer offered human bodies all the nutrients they needed. And then secondly, it's quite possible that the human genome was no longer able to efficiently extract all of its nutrients from plants just because of that genetic bottleneck. So we think that's probably like why humans started needing to eat animal products to supplement what their bodies were not getting from plants anymore. It's also worth noting on this principle that traditional cultures do tend to use the entire animal and not let any of it go to waste. Some people refer to this as nose to tail, so it's like the whole thing. So that's going to include fat and organ meats, which are important sources of necessary nutrients. Okay, so number 3 is to focus on nutrient-dense foods. So the foods that are going to give you the most bang for your buck, basically. You want one of those? You can have one. Baby found the cucumbers. Okay, so the foods that are going to give you the most bang for your buck. I'm sorry, this is a little embarrassing that this is so like all over the place. Hopefully you're still getting something from it. But like traditional cultures ate much more nutrient dense diets than that of the average American. They had like 4 to 10 times the amounts of minerals and water and fat soluble vitamins. So worth noting, make sure the foods you're choosing are good sources of nutrients and not like empty calories. Okay, number 4 is to eat a mix of raw and cooked foods. All traditional cultures cooked some of their foods and then ate some portion of their animal products raw. That could be like raw meat, actually, if you have like good quality meat, or it could just be raw dairy. And I kind of stick to the raw dairy. I have a little bit of a hard time thinking about eating raw meat. But anyway, number 5 is to eat plenty of fermented foods. And this is like where the healthy gut thing like really shines. Most much of, I don't know, would it be much of or most? Anyway, a lot of your gut health comes from beneficial bacteria, and fermented food is an amazing source of beneficial bacteria. And like vegetables, dairy, fruit, meat, like all of that can be fermented, and you can eat that as a regular part of your diet and put a lot of good bacteria into your gut for optimal health. Okay, number 6 is very interesting one to me, because I think that it shines a light on things like gluten-free diet and the paleo diet, and this, or the autoimmune paleo even. So this one is to soak, sprout, or ferment your seeds, grains, and nuts. You've possibly heard that a lot of people who can't, or some people who can't tolerate gluten, end up having no issues when they use true, like long fermented sourdough. And that is because grains, seeds, and nuts contain anti-nutrients that the human body can't digest. So, of course, that's going to cause problems and tear up your gut and make you unhealthy and unhappy and uncomfortable. I find it super interesting that the foods that are excluded on autoimmune paleo, the autoimmune paleo protocol for healing your body of autoimmune diseases, are foods that in their natural state truly can be harmful to the human body. So when you soak, sprout, or ferment these foods, that's going to counteract the anti-nutrients and unlock the nutrients so that your bodies can actually digest them. And there's like a lot more that goes into that, but I know this video is already running super long. Okay, number 7, focus on healthy fats. And the amount of fat you eat can vary based on what feels best for your individual body and genetic makeup. So that's why I'm not going to be like, you must eat keto, high fat, or you must eat low fat. Like, I'm not really a low fat person at all. I think fats are good for your bodies if you eat the right kinds of fats. And the majority of fats in the traditional diets were saturated and monounsaturated fatty acids. Number 8, balance your omegas. Traditional diets, this one like blew me away when I learned about this one. So traditional diets create an almost 50-50 split between omega-6s and omega-3s. And you've probably heard like, eat more omega-3s, eat lots of omega-3s. And that is because the vegetable oils that are prevalent in the standard American diet are extremely high in omega-6 fatty acids. So we've got this huge imbalance of like, I don't know, something ridiculous, like 90% omega-6s or something like that, and like this measly amount of omega-3s. So it's not so much that like we need like all these omega-3s, it's that we need this balance. So if you're cutting out vegetable oils, you're going to get a pretty good balance. Like if you're just, following these principles, it's not so much supplementing with omega-3s, it's eating a good diet. And you probably know like some of the negative effects omega-6s can have on your body, but just a bunch of different health issues. Okay, so number 9, salt is not your enemy. Okay, when you're using real salt, it is good for you. It has minerals and nutrients that your body needs. The problem is that a lot of the salt available in the United States today it falls within that, you remember number 1, the denatured foods category. So it's had a lot of that stuff stripped out. It's had processing done to it to make it more white. Sometimes it has additives, like sugar is sometimes in your salt, believe it or not. But if you're using like the real unprocessed stuff, then it is actually going to be good for you. We're almost done here. I got 2 more. Okay, so number 10 is to use the bones. And this really goes along with the whole like nose to tail idea. But bones, animal bones, are a super, super, super good source of nutritious gut healing nutrients. Like when you process them into broth, well, we all know broth is good for you, and it's going to boost your health. Yeah, broth is good for you. So use your bones. And then number 11 is really fascinating. This is one of Dr. Price's original principles that he noticed when he was studying the traditional peoples. He noticed that they made special provisions for the health of their childbearing couples. So preparing especially for pregnancy, because the traditional peoples, these groups, recognized that the health of their future was in the children. And they realized that if your childbearing couples are not fully supporting their bodies, both male and female, by the way, are not like, eating optimally, eating like the healthiest foods. So they would save like the best foods for the couples who were of childbearing years. Because if you like think of a mother who is carrying a child in her womb, if she doesn't have those nutrients in her body, the baby isn't going to get them. So they would give the best foods to pregnant women, to men who were married and in childbearing years. I don't know why this is so like awkward to think of the right way to say this, but like they recognized that was a big deal. So if you're having kids, this is a big one. So this is basically what my family has like your brain goes when you have kids, right? What we have settled on as the way that our family eats is following these principles. And like that can look different in different seasons. Like, if we need a reset, maybe we'll like cut out a whole bunch of stuff for a while, like some of you here in this group are doing right now with, cutting out sugars or dairy or gluten or whatever. But this can fit like in a little bit more of a loose structure too. Like maybe you allow grains, but you always process them, you always sour them. And that's why I make sourdough. Like that's the only kind of bread, almost the only kind of bread that we eat. We do cheat sometimes, but largely this is how my family has decided to eat. So I would be really curious to know how, like what these sound like, how these sound to you, if these sound like principles that you try to follow, or like if you take issue with some of them. I know there is, I'm not going to call you out by name, but I know I have like at least one vegan friend in this group. But just, I'm curious, like where you fall on these principles and what you think about them, and whether this sounds like something that you would like to follow yourself. And yeah, that's all I have for you today. So let me know what you think, and I will talk to you later. All right, bye-bye.